Iko Nini. So jana kwa news kuna vile kulikuwa na story that accounts za Wamatangi zimekuwa frozen, and this came like less than 48 hours after his businesses were like demolished along hiyo area ya Nyayo Stadium. I think inaitwa something wa Kihori Road, and this made me want to know more about this story. And one of the things that stands out ikikam to his story ni kumekuwa na conflict imekuwa ikihappen between Ruto and Wamatangi without the rest of us knowing about it. And I think this also reminds me that I think when now on Wednesday, like after the buildings were demolished on Tuesday night, I think Boni alikuwa ameandika about that, and I remember seeing the Boni video and I didn't understand it well till I went digging into this whole story nika find out that yenyewe jo Kenya jo. Okay, but wacha tucheki.
Wamatangi na Ruto wanapigana stories za affordable housing. So Ruto ameenda kubomoa biashara ya Wamatangi. But now the biggest victim ni wale walikuwa wamepark gari zao hapo kwa Wamatangi. Kulikuwa na carpets zilikuwa zimeoshwa, like the innocent citizen has lost because two politicians are fighting. Reclaim all stolen land for all you want. Actually, reclaim that one, go demolish Weston, but make sure you protect private citizens. Wacha kuumia mkipigana nyi wenyewe.
Acheki. So hiyo ndio kitu Boni alibaki amepost. So umesikia Boni amesema one thing like one of the things that happening watu walipoteza their businesses of course, and watu walipoteza magari zao, and also watu walipoteza carpets. And nani tunajua alipoteza carpets jo? Emmanuel Kisiangani jo. Kisiangani alibaki amepoteza carpet yake kwa studio Kisiangani waga hiyo area. Unajua area ya Mada. So apparently on Monday, I think, yes, ama Tuesday itself, I think it's Tuesday during the day, alipeleka carpet yoshwe jo. Alafu Tuesday usiku property ikakuwa destroyed. Na kitu ilikuwa funny ni funny na sad. And nini Kisiangani jo iza jo na kucheka, but kitu ilikuwa funny ni Kisiangani alido a video about this whole thing where he was walking towards the place, and you could actually see people stealing carpets jo. Kenya inakuwaga serious jo. So chikirazi napita na carpets hapo tunashindwa jo ni gani jo. So sijui jo kama keja yako na uko na carpet imeandikwa Nziges, tafadhali jo rudisha kwa Kisiangani jo. Tusikue hivyo jo. Podcasts are cannot afford to lose a carpet, but ilikuwa very sad. Of course right now na cheka but I think na cheka tu cause Kisiangani of course is a comedian, and I found that to be funny that kuna hiyo nini alicapture. If you've not watched it, kuna hiyo video alibaki amedu inaitwa ni Wamatangi owes as a carpet, and just go and watch it, and it's just funny cause at some point unachekia kifika hapo unachikira haya zikitoka na carpets jo, alafu you just know it's thievery. And that's what pisses me off with this country, that if people get a chance to steal, they always steal. But now wacha to go back to history ya Ruto na Wamatangi. So umesikia kile Boni amesema that this is a fight about affordable housing, and this fight about affordable housing has ended up being too costly for Wamatangi. Why? Because originally I think when this government came into power, Ruto na Wamatangi were still in good terms. Like even in 2023, I think there was an article where he'd said, I think Kiambu was setting out, I think it's 10 acres of land, yes, for the housing project. And then at some point, I think Wamatangi akamea pembe, according to Ruto, that is. After kumea pembe, wakaleta na juu. So the conflict started from the fact that Wamatangi was not ready to hand over land ya Kiambu for affordable housing. But Ruto on the other side looks at Kiambu and sees a place that's very strategic. Why? Number one, it's very close to Nairobi. Number two, he has like Kikuyus are there, and if somehow he can do this project, he's convincing himself that somehow he can be able to still get them on his side hata kama amekosana na Gachagua. So there's that element. Alafu of course pia ukiangalia the fact that iko close to Nairobi inamaanisha pia there's a high housing demand. So it thinks like if I can nizapatia sale nini makeja wanaweza nipenda. But then Wamatangi on the other side, poleni kama nimekuwa nikisema Wamatiangi since nianze. Wamatangi on the other side alikuwa na argue that the land itself belongs to Kiambu residents and not the national government. That was his number one argument. The number two, pia alikuwa anasema that any land transfer for easy housing lazima ipitie through the county assembly ya Kiambu, and the national government will have to follow what the Kiambu like MCAs say and the Kiambu county assembly say. And somehow walikuwa najua Kiambu county assembly won't accept for this land kwenda kwa the national government. Then pia akabaki ameuliza that yes, tulizapatiana hii land, and yes, these affordable houses can be built on Kiambu land, but what's going to happen? Are the average, is the average Kiambu resident going to benefit from that? Is it just going to be the political bigwigs? Because don't forget, another thing that happens with Kiambu is the fact that Kiambu is very close to Nairobi means that the value of land in Kiambu is uko juu. It's super high. So this is lucrative land. And you know how things happen in Kenya. The political bigwigs are always the ones that benefit. So when he said this, ikakuwa like kaleta shida, kuza kwa like yes, tukipatiana hii land yote, what are we benefiting? Like what sort of compensation is either the county getting or the people getting? And this seems to have pissed off Ruto, because Ruto on the other side alikuwa anaiangalia hivi, ikikam to housing, that's his number one agenda. This is his legacy. So if this guy is doing that, then anachikua that ini kumsabotage. So that was number one. So he looks at this as sabotage. Alafu another thing pia akaicheki kama nile design huwa Matangi ameweza kuni challenge, cause in 2023 alikuwa amekubali. So right now the only reason maybe anakataa is cause anataka kujoin Gachagua. Like this is political defiance. And if this political defiance, I'm going to deal with him categorically. So and that's where now history ingine ina come up, history ya land ya next to Nyayo. So we have to look at that first before we look at what happened on now Thursday, because this land was reclaimed on Tuesday night. Na hii land kureclaimiwa, it's one of those stories that's super interesting, because you see, remember the way it was reclaimed, the first thing tuliambiwa is that this thing had been built on public land. But what we were not told is yes, this thing had been built on public land, that is land owned by Kenya Railways. But what we were not told was Wamatangi has been renting this land. He's been leasing this land. And since he's been renting it, he's actually been paying like money. Amekuwa kilipa rent for this piece of land. And on the other side, say wamekuwa kichukua hiyo do. Acheki. So Kenya Airways have been, not Kenya Airways, Kenya Railways have been taking the money. So if they've been taking the money, what does that mean? That means that he was not on grab land, because he was legally there. Because I think before, even me, when I first had the case, the first thing that came to mind was vile nilisikia ini land ya Kenya Railways, kachukua ufala, lazima iko alikuwa amegrabi land. Then you find out like no, he was renting the land and he was paying the lease. So that's the first thing that utaland hiyo kitu. Alafu so since alikuwa ameirent, ye mwenyewe ameirent alafu akaisublet. So akaisublet, so kulikuwa na hiyo place ya car wash, kulikuwa na place ya kuosha carpets, and that's why unachekijo beste yetu Kisiangani akabaki amepoteza carpet yake. So now this case ya Wamatangi, it's scary because it shows a few things. Even before we come back to the Ruto conflict, although the Ruto conflict is in the center of all this, one of the things that it shows you is how useless a court order is. Because Wamatangi had gone to the Milimani Commercial Court na alikuwa amepata zile orders za hakufai kuwa na demolition. But what happened? The demolition still happened. And ye mwenyewe, I think another thing that amejitetea juu yake ni hakupatiwa like a valid eviction notice, like a formal eviction notice. There was not that. Yes. Alafu another thing ile anasema alikuwa na lease, and hii lease yake rent ilikuwa ina get paid. Yes, so he had a lease and the rent was getting paid. That means he was there like legally. And then another thing anasema like wameviolate article 40, and the article 40 ni gani? Right to property. Look at vile waliharibu magari, which was so unnecessary, like from the car wash. Mbeleni kuna fikiri damage kumefikia 1824. Somehow 1824 was able to be saved. Damn, 1824 lucky, because ule mse wa 150 million, the one who had like 650 million, if I'm not wrong, his case got dropped. So damn, 1824 there's a lot of luck hapo. Alafu pia sasa juu kitu ilikuwa demolished. Pia another thing that Wamatangi was talking about was there was a violation of fair administrative action, meaning that the case was still active stroke pending. So why did these people act the way they acted? And how did they act? Walitokea usiku wakabagi wamedestroy vitu, na wakidestroy hizi vitu walikuwa nazidestroy wakiwa protected by the police. And remember, the police are supposed to be the sort of people that Iko Nini, like they are supposed to maintain law and order, and one of the ways of maintaining law and order is following court orders. But now the court orders were disregarded, so this makes it a very interesting case. And this is now where we start seeing the politics, and this is where we start seeing Ruto's hand, because this is Ruto cutting down this guy to size. Nacheki ile kumkumbusha like Iko Nini, like hawezi kuwa hapo na una act ni kama haujui like what's happening. So of course sasa now the properties got destroyed. If you check, everyone, even me, nilikuwa part of the people who thought that this guy owned the land. Najua vile tulisikia that Wamatangi's businesses had been destroyed. We thought he owned the land, then we come and find out that he was leasing the land. And now Kenya Railways on the other side, what are they saying? Wana claim that the land itself is a railway reserve. Sawa, tumekubali. But then wanasema that the structures were illegal encroachments. And when they say that the structures were illegal encroachments, we have to ask ourselves, if this guy has been paying rent, who has the rent been going to? Because if the rent has been going to Kenya Railways, that means he was there legally. But if the rent has been going to individual pockets, even if those individual pockets are within Kenya Railways, then he was there illegally. But according to Wamatangi, this rent has been going to Kenya Railways. Yes. So Kenya Railways, so kuna hiyo. So history ya illegal encroachment tutacheki vile itabaki imeisha, how that is going to be argued. Then of course kitu moja wakasema ni this whole demolition is part of the public infrastructure planning, and that means that right now wana plan for 2027 AFCON, and they feel like that road, I think, needs to be expanded for easier movement or what. Hiyo road imekuwa weird for some time. Kumekuwa na this pile of soil in the middle of the road that has been there for some time, and maybe I think that would have been kitu moja ile if I was a Wamatangi and I had a problem with Ruto, that would have been a clear sign that something is going to happen. So that happened. But yes, kitu moja ile na happen according to Gava ishajitetea, inasema that there was no political motive behind this demolition. Then another thing ile wanasema pia, au wenyewe wanasema that all they are doing is enforcement of public land laws, and they are protecting public land. But kitu moja lazima tushinda tukijiuliza, if rent was getting paid, who was taking this rent? Yes, and if this rent was being taken, then this amounts to political persecution. And now I think the thing that makes this thing 100% now in my mind, like before ninge doubt it's political persecution till what happened on Thursday happened. So on Thursday, all of a sudden now they freeze his money. So what's the probability of Tuesday night biashara zako zinadikwa demolished, then Thursday your accounts are frozen? Those two things have to be related, because don't forget that these things are supposed to be happening from two very independent organizations. Najua EACC on one side and wasewa Kenya Railways on the other side, but somehow, but wacha tusikize vile story yake ya nini frozen accounts ili happen.
Tukirejea hapa nchini, gavana wa Kiambu Kimani Wamatangi amepata pigo jingine baada ya mahakama kuu kuagiza kuendelea kufungwa kwa akaunti zake za benki. Aidha, agizo hili pia limeagiza kufungwa kwa akaunti za mkewe na wanawe pamoja na watu wengine 10 wanaohusishwa na kesi ya ufisadi ya zaidi ya shilingi milioni 800 alipokuwa seneta wa Kiambu. Uamuzi huo umezidisha masaibu yanayomkabili gavana huyo siku moja tu baada ya mali yake thamani ya mamilioni ya pesa kuharibiwa hapa Nairobi.
So, unacheki, so this happens, these accounts are frozen straight after businesses were destroyed. Na hizi businesses unacheki vile inasemekana, he was there and he was paying rent, so he had occupied these spaces legally. And I think one of the advantages that the government took was knowing that we are so divided, so that when we had this, a lot of us, we just assumed he was trying to grab the land. And you see, that's some prime land, hiyo land iko hapo. So now accounts zimekuwa frozen, and this is where now you start seeing the political hand, because your coincidence, like this happens, then you go back to the fact that he refused to give up land for public housing, affordable housing, na for Ruto, that's like his major deal. But wacha tuendelee.
Masaibu yanayomkabili gavana wa Kiambu Wamatangi yanaonekana kuzidi siku moja tu baada ya kukadiria hasara ya mamilioni ya pesa kufuatia ubomoaji wa mali yake katika kampuni yanayomiliki ya Super Clean Shine Enterprise Limited mkabala na uwanja wa Nyayo. Mahakama Kuu imeongeza muda wa amri ya kufunga akaunti za benki anazomiliki pamoja na za mkewe na watoto wake. Hatua hiyo ilifuatia ombi lililowasilishwa na tume ya kupambana na ufisadi nchini EACC, ambayo inachunguza madai ya ufisadi wa shilingi milioni 813 alipokuwa seneta wa Kiambu mnamo Oktoba 31 mwaka jana. EACC iliwasilisha kesi mahakamani dhidi ya gavana Wamatangi na watu wengine 13 ikitaka kurejeshwa kwa fedha hizo zinazodaiwa kwa mapato ya ufisadi.
Okay, I don't know why they do that, but yes, so inasemekana hii ni 13 million, alafu utashindwa like how did he make money, like all that money through corruption. And this is where they explain that during his time in the Senate alikuwa head of what.
Kesi hiyo ilitokana na uchunguzi wa EACC kuhusu madai ya ufisadi Wamatangi alipokuwa mwenyekiti wa kamati ya seneti ya barabara na uchukuzi. Kulingana na wachunguzi, kati ya mwaka wa kifedha wa 2018-2019 na mwaka wa 2021 mwaka wa 2022, Wamatangi anadaiwa kutumia vibaya wadhifa wake kushawishi utoaji wa zabuni za ujenzi wa barabara na mamlaka ya Kenya, ile ya kura pamoja na mamlaka ya barabara vijijini KERA kwa kampuni 5 zinazodaiwa kuhusishwa naye.
Damn, unacheki. So inasemekana umse alimeki do hiyo time alikuwa head of hiyo nini ya roads, and yes, so this is why they are coming after him. And it's so interesting because umse ataki come to this property being demolished. The first time it got demolished was 2019, but 2019, remember that time pia ilikuwa ye mwenye na Uhuru alikuwa mekosana because he was supporting Ruto. And now of course after 2019 court orders zika happen, somehow the Uhuru government was okay, and this guy thought he was safe because he was supporting Ruto. And then whatever happened, ile akakataa kupatia na land. So vile amekataa kupatia na land, I think Ruto akamweka Iko Nini, I'm going to teach you a very good lesson. And damn, this is a painful lesson, because try and imagine all those like all the property that was destroyed, all the businesses that were destroyed. And remember, it's the government, and if the government is against you, somehow they're going to get away with it. And now frozen accounts.
Amri ya mahakama ya kufunga akaunti hizo itaendelea kutekelezwa hadi Februari 4 mwaka huu, wakati kesi hiyo itakapotajwa tena mbele ya Jaji Lucy Njuguna. Wakati huo huo, gavana huyo ambaye bado anaendelea kukabiliana na hasara ya mamilioni ya pesa kufuatia ubomoaji wa mali yake uliofanyika alfajiri ya Jumatano, alikuwa akikusanya kile alichoweza na kuziweka kwenye makontena katika juhudi za kuokoa kilichosalia. Gavana Wamatangi anasema alipoteza mali ya thamani ya zaidi ya shilingi milioni 250 wakati wa zoezi hilo lililoendeshwa na shirika la reli nchini.
Achekijo, hii story yote ilifanywa na Kenya Railways, and it goes back to that original question. And the original question was, if he's been paying rent, who has the rent been going to? And if the rent has been going to Kenya Railways, how can Kenya Railways then turn around and say that he was there illegally? So this goes to show that this is political, and it's political, and it's interesting because there's also a very interesting angle that this brings up. If Ruto can use his power to destroy a business, a business worth millions, hundreds of millions, that's on public land, it also means that Weston, that can also happen to Weston. Why? Because don't forget, Ruto says he's protected because he's in power. Someone else comes and takes over, can pretend to be like, oh, but akiingia pale a change. Kumbuka even Ruto ile time alikuwa deputy, he used to go through hell under Uhuru, because when you don't have power, you don't have power. But then when he came into power, he himself was able to save a lot of his cronies. Kumbuka, one of the people that he saved, people forget this, was Gachagua. Gachagua had a fraud case, I think a land or something. Ruto saved him. Ilikuwa worth, I think, 1.5 billion. That case was dropped. Another case that was dropped ilikuwa ile attempted, kuna GC case ya mythical Inturi, that was dropped. Another case ilikuwa ni either murder ama attempted murder, ile ya Aisha Jumwa, hiyo pia ilikuwa dropped. So a lot of cases za his allies zilikuwa dropped na ikasemekana that they were politically motivated. So now we see a very clear line of there's this one governor who defies this guy. And after defying him, his life is just turned upside down. Because another thing juu ya Wamatangi, nakumani kiuliza Ian, like this was before ni juu ya his stories, like, hey, what do you think are his chances for a second term? And Ian was telling me this guy stands a very high chance that he's actually doing a very good job uko Kiambu. Yeah, so a lot of people like him. So he's doing a good job. And on top of that, him doing that good job, that's why he was confident enough to be like, you know what, you can't take this land because this land belongs to the county and not the national government. And on the other side, Ruto was like, Iko Nini, nenda kukufundisha, nenda kukuonyesha kuwa haujui. And now whatever is happening to him is happening to him. Iko Nini. So the festive season is here. Na LemFi wako na a very great offer kwako. Abaki umesign up ukitumia the promo code Iko Nini, and on your first transaction ya $50 ukisend home, unabaki umepata a $20 sign up reward. Najua $20 sign up reward on your first transaction of $50 only. Why? Because it's the festive season. Baki umechangamka, tumia promo code Iko Nini, ingia LemFi. Why? Upate the most competitive exchange rates. Alafu pia inakuwaga ni chap like transactions ziko instant. Changamka haraka, LemFi, international payments for everyone. Iko Nini. So it's interesting because I also say, na nitasema kitu moja, like before nicheki hata ukiwatch video ya Kisiangani, uta notice like a lot of us tukibonga juu story, kuna bonga juu story as grabbed land. But it was not grabbed land, it was leased land. So this means that he could have been asked to, unajua, move. They could have even gone as far, like kuna magari hapo, wangeamua like hizi gari, we can move the cars. But for them to just destroy the cars, I think this was a lesson. This was a message being sent. And the message being sent was WSR nothing to fuck with. Najua, like a mess with WSR. And so it's interesting. It's but another pia maybe scary thing that we can learn from all this, especially sisi kama middle class, ni understanding how injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere, and why we should always be concerned. Ukiangalia what was happening in 2024, that is when the protests were happening, and watu wakaenda wakiwa short. This was the first time that a lot of Kenyans actually understood that the Kenya police shoot for no reason. Kumbuka. So it means that all that time kulikuwa na zile deaths zote because na happen. There's a very big chunk of Kenyans who used to ignore that. Now, like, how am I talking about that while this is about demolitions? Because this is not just about demolitions. This is also about court orders and how court orders can be ignored. Kumbuka, like one of my major gripes zile nakuwaga nayo na nini Matiang'i, inakuwaga the fact that Matiang'i used to ignore court orders, and that to me is dangerous. Now try and imagine the Ruto government has decided to ignore court orders, and What does this mean? This means that a court order is so useless that mtu anaweza ichukua. Acheki nakumbuka tukiwa watoi class 8 nilimalizia chuo fulani inaitwa St Patrick's Hill kusoma side za Kiserian. And one of the things that I learned, tulikuwa chuo ya kibabi kabisa, but pia even with babini I think tuko tunatoke home na TP, but sometimes the TP would end na ikiisha. I remember sijaisahau boy fulani came from a rich family. A boy fulani ndio taja jina yake ya kwanza, I think, yes, alikuwa anaitwa Abel. For sure this dude this is over 32 years ago, so I hope the dude is still around, man. Najua like, cause damn watu pia huenda, so hopefully still around. And but I remember akinionyesha like, hey, ukishia choo chukuanga PayPal alafu unacheza nayo hivi ni kama unainini, then you make it's going to make it very soft. Kwa nini zimwagia few drops, it's going to be very good for wiping pale unafaa kuwipe. And I think that's what this government is showing us, that court orders can just be used to wipe haga, because otherwise it makes no sense. And this is very scary. And this also goes back to what I was saying about the middle class, because the middle class, I think for a very long time, and I'll say that I'm part of that middle class, so I am also taking the criticism myself, but tumekuwa very disconnected with injustice in this country, because tumekuwa tukiacha it's like this poor people struggle. But now we see this is nani Wamatangi. This is someone who's, if they can freeze 813 million of his, this is someone who's like a billionaire and is going through that. And a billionaire's court order has been thrown out. Now what about me and you? And this is the reason why we need the law to be followed, because if the court order is supposed to be like your last line of defense, like kama niko na hii, then nothing can happen. But if the national government can ignore court order, it means that any other company within Kenya which is powerful enough can ignore court order. And what are we left with? Don't forget, this is the same week that LSK came out to fight the judiciary. Nakumbuka, because judiciary ilipaki rule that they can't do business with private like lawyers and whatever can't do business pamoja. Then that whole LSK thing happened, and wakasema that the judiciary has gone rogue. It's time to bring them down to size. Basically they threatened the judiciary. Kumbuka, I related that story with the story gani ya Uhuru akithreaten the judiciary back in 2017 after the elections ilikuwa annulled. And what happened the next time, like a few weeks later, there was this sham election, repeat election that happened. Remember, even kids were voting, and Supreme Court ikaikubali tu. Why? Because they'd been threatened. Now if you have a situation whereby LSK itself inatuambia that the courts can F off, alafu the executive, we've always known the executive always feels like it's above the courts, ama they're above the judiciary. UPNSM can F off. What are we left with? We are left with a situation where we are living in a jungle, and this is scary, man. I won't lie to you, this is a little bit scary, because there is no line of defense. Like right now, if you go, because even more like a cases mob sana, where you see blah 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 has sued blah blah blah, and they've been paid this chunk of money, and you getting the payment, you winning in court is one thing, but you getting the payment is another thing. I remember kuna buda fulani nishai interview anaitwa Hesbon, and Hesbon was arrested in 1982. Walisema he was part of the coup, and eventually he was tortured and paid by the Kenyan courts. He's never received his money, and I think the last time aliniambia ni lawyer wake alikuwa anamthreaten anataka ku-auction vitu zake but hajailipwa. You understand, like this is the sort of place that we live in, and it's so lawless and so scary at the same time. So this Wamatangi versus Ruto fight also shows us how we are living in dangerous times, najua, and how injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere, and how a narrative can be controlled. When this story was being pushed out there, the first thing that we were told was grabbed land. So tuko najua hii land imegrabiwa. Then you come and find out, no, this land had been leased. someone has gotten paid like consistently. There is a track record, yani. So who has gotten paid? Has it been Kenya Railways or has it been individuals? Because if it's individuals, then we can say that there was an illegal encroachment. But if it's Kenya Railways, then we can say that Nani was there legally, Wamatangi. And yes, it's scary. But damn, but hii pia imenikumbusha, maybe nikimalizia, I need to address some elephant in the room. So bila nilifanya ile video, nilifanya jia lawyers doing business with government, najua private lawyers doing business with government. I talked about wastage of public funds, and one of the examples that I gave out was I felt like the Attorney General needs to do more. And apart from the Attorney General, I gave the example of places kama states where there's a state attorney and the district attorney, and in the process I was talking about how those people help to save their cities money. And kuna boy flani to Alex Masharia, he was losing it kabisa, because the fact that nilisema that with that America saves money. So somehow wakasema that with that I meant that America does not waste any money. I forgot to bring up the Pentagon, which is very interesting because the Pentagon is still under the government. When I was talking about the government, I was talking about the government doing business with private lawyers. Like the government has its own lawyers, alafu ina do business with private lawyers, while it has lawyers that can handle the case. How does the Pentagon come into this? But umse kabaki, because one thing I'll say, like Alex Mashari organam respect, because he watches every video. He watches to disagree. Hawachigi to, which is okay. But sasa nimekuwa nikifikiria, what if I could sit down with such people? Because kuna kukana wase, like mostly all I do is I sit down with celebrities and I sit down with politicians and what. What if I could sit down with Raya Kawaida? And I want to, this is something that I want to try out. Nataka do a few podcasts on the streets with Raya za Kawaida. One of the first invites nenda kupatiana ni Alex Masharia. So if you're watching this, man, I'm putting out that invite to you, because I'd want us to have that conversation, and I don't want it to be confrontational. I feel like that's what I hate about Kenya. Is everything the confrontation. Like I'm talking about state attorney, district attorney helping these cities save money, but msana feel like, oh, msana America ni perfect, msana they don't waste money. What about the Pentagon? I'm like, we are not talking about the Pentagon. We are not talking about war. America wastes money on war. That's public knowledge. That's the reason why the few people like Americans who go to China na wanaisifu that China spends its money on development while America spends its money on unnecessary wars. That's, I think, public knowledge, najua. But it was interesting to see how waswani za twist vitu. The same way kuna boy flani ule anaitwa Agar. Huyo nishaimu invite hapa, but I also feel like tuna need to have another conversation on the streets about Russia. Huyo boy amekataa ku admit that joining the Russia military is very different from joining the American and UK military. Does that mean that America and UK don't have racism? Yes, they do. But when you join their armies, you're not intentionally put in the front line. Within Guinea, unaputwa in the front line. Paka I think kulikuwa na video iko na go around ya Russian flani akisema that look at all these disposables. Ayawaswanini. But yes. So if you're that sort of person, una disagree na mimi kabisa, na unafikiria tunaweza have a podcast on the streets, let's do that, man. That's one of the things that I want to do. Why am I doing the podcast on the streets? Because also sometimes when I go to the CBD, especially, I see stuff that I didn't find there. So I always find it to be interesting. So I'd want maybe people who've not visited Nairobi for some time to see the different things that are happening, the development that are happening, the good and the bad, the potholes and all the nonsense that happens, and still have interesting conversations where we can agree to disagree. So these sort of street conversations, I'm looking strictly for Iko Nini fans who strongly disagree with me. For example, Alex Masharia. So Alex Masharia, uko wapi? Are you ready to step in front of a camera and expose my ignorance? I'm always glad to sit down with people and have a discussion. We don't always have to agree, as long as we keep it respectful. Sina shida. Good morning. Iko Nini.